as this game, Anime Vanguards update 0.5 has been out for a little bit, thought it'd be nice to come in and do a little bit of a tier list. You know what I'm saying? Uh, bit of a tier list on the units who I think are some of the better, and just main units. There's not any real rares on here. I don't think Sasuke and Gino should be on here, but hey, they're on here, so nothing to do about it. I'm gonna start off with the easiest one, the farm units. The farm units, Sprint Wagon, is best for the, how should I say, 15 wave story mode, legend stages. This is the guy you probably want to bring. Even in Paragon, he might be the better option to bring. However, they just released the new farm, Takaroda. Takaroda is, I hope I'm saying that name right. He is, if anybody's played Anime Adventures or a lot of other anime tower defense games, he is essentially Bulma or Bulmy. The legendary farm unit gives you 10,000 yen on max upgrade, and if you have fortune or golden or whatever one of those, that will give, I think it's 20% boost, so 12,000. I mean, him without golden will give you more than, or fortune will give you more than Sprint Wagon would with fortune. But for the most part, he's better. Takaroda is better for the longer events, wave 20 or infinite. Sprint Wagon is better for the 15 wave events, story, paragon, legend stages. For the bleed, I'm moving on to bleed, stop regeneration. Inosuke was the main one, unless you had Alucard. He was just good for stopping regeneration. Full stop. Regen was the best thing to pick for Paragons. That's all he was used for. He's an epic. He's not really doing much. Another new unit was added, though. Bean, as he's called in the game. A legendary bleed unit who stops regen. Does more damage. Better AoE circle, per se. I haven't used him much, just because I've been playing games since the beginning. I have units who just insta-kill. I'm also someone who got lucky and got Monarch on Sun Jin Woo, so I haven't really used any of the bleed units like that. But Bean is good for those who do not have that insta-kill, strong unit that just kills everything on one hit or two hits. He's also really good for the new raid, Act 4, as those demons regen a lot of health. So you bring in Bean, he will absolutely stop the regen, giving you and anybody you're playing with just a much easier time dealing with them. Nothing else really to say for him. I mean, again, I haven't used him, but I do know that he does do good bleed damage. Better than Inosuke, just because Inosuke is an epic, Bean is a legendary. Moving on to the supports. You have Alligator, the only unit in the game who slows enemies down, which is much better than anyone else can really say. Killua, he stuns units. Pretty good. I would say, though, there is a better stun unit, and I'll get to him in a second. You have Blossom. Her only purpose for supporting is to debuff the snare. In Act 4 of the raid, the bosses will snare down your units, and it stuns them indefinitely. That's all she's good for. She is good to negate that. I don't think there is another thing that she is good for. However, if they continue to add bosses like that, whether maybe it lowers range, ups SBA, lowers damage, or any other form of stunning potential, she could be good use against that. But for the most part, right now, Act 4 is her only purpose to be used. Other than that, you're not using her anywhere else. Agony, or Pain, he repulses the unit. So he actually pushes the unit back, with the exception of the boss. This can be really good for infinites, as those enemy, like even the little enemies, start to get up there in health. This could be good for paragons. You're running very high paragon. There's a lot of modifiers. Could help you in that. And I think even you could get some use in Act 4. However, I think you're just better off bringing pure damage, trying to kill those units. Other than that, I mean, he's just good at repulsing the unit. He also has pretty good AoE, which Killua and Alligator don't. So he could be better than them in terms of his support. And then finally, Sasuke. I consider Sasuke a meta, or not finally, but I'll talk about her in a second. I'll consider Sasuke a meta support more than just a unit to bring for damage, because he stuns on Evo. And they did buff his stun cooldown from 2 to 1, meaning every single hit is going to stun the enemies now. I believe that's what it means. I haven't used them recently. But his stun is pretty damn good. And I have Blitz on him, so he's attacking a lot quicker than he probably does normally. Still, really good stun unit. Actually deals enough damage to be useful for you. Don't know how long that's going to last, though. And now the true final support unit that I completely forgot about, Haruka Rin. Haruka is a damage and after 6 waves, range support. Her damage support goes up to 18%. Her range support is, I believe, 10%. Both really good. However, I don't personally like to run her. The damage and range is great, but with how hard Infinite is, and how much health and regen the Act 4 units, the Act 4 enemies have, I just don't see her as useful now. Because I kind of want to, I want to be able to deal more than enough damage while also having multiple other units who deal the damage. And she isn't dealing damage. um, at least not in the way you might intend for her to deal damage. Or she's not dealing damage, she's trying to buff damage. She doesn't do any real damage herself. So I kind of don't like running her. I personally prefer someone who slows down enemies or repulses them, or Sasuke's outright stun. Moving on to the B tier. These are okay and decent units, where it's like, yeah, it's good to bring them if you have them, but they're much better options, whether it's down the road or much better options in your inventory itself. I want to start off with Naruto Six Tails. Naruto, he's cheap and he's good for early defense. However, he lost that a little bit. Not because he's been, power crept or just his damage isn't good enough. Nothing like that. It's the fact that they buffed another unit who will do the job better. To continue this, I personally don't think his damage and SPA and range are all good enough compared to the other units. And he's probably the only real B tier unit out of the rest. Maybe you could throw Sasuke in there, but Sasuke also has the stun, which makes him, a meta support unit. That's really all I could say about him. I've used him a little bit, and I just did not think he was that good. So he's all right, but there are a lot better units here. Next is Chain. I'm putting her in A tier. Chain was an S tier character before this update, but with the release of Tengen, I believe she's moved down to A tier. Also, her purpose was immediately replaced with the secret, or secret of this of release and update 0.5 being Igris. They both are boss killers. And Igris is more of a guaranteed boss killer than Chayan is, at least with my experience. I suck at getting crits. I don't want to really roll for Deadeye on her because, you can get Monarch on Igris, or if you have Alucard or Rengoku. I preferred to spin on Sun Jin Woo, and I got Monarch on him, right? So I think Chayan is A tier. So she's a phenomenal boss killer, but if you have Igris or even Tengen, I think you're in much better position using them. Chayan is a single hit compared to Igris' multi-hit. She's not a full AoE, but she's pretty damn close to it, so I don't even want to use that against her. Her range is good. I just think on release, her damage was not good enough. Her damage on release, and even now, are just not high enough for it to just be a crit unit. However, she does get 100% dodge, and when she dodges, her next attack does do 60% more damage. So if you get a crit on that, of course, again, boss killer. But that being your only purpose, and there was another unit, a better unit, who came out with you at the same time, who kind of takes that purpose away from you, it's rough. It's rough to be Chayan in this situation, right? Also, she's a 5 placement, so you could actually get good return on the damage. But again, it's just 5 different units to upgrade that ultimately aren't going to do enough compared to Igris or majority of the other mythic units. Next is Obito. Obito is probably the one I'd flip back and forth between S and A, because it really depends on what you want. Using him, he's great for burn damage. 30% of his damage is burn. I have Ethereal on him. He does, I believe, 14.4k maxed out. And his Flame Tornadoes are I believe, 3 hit. That's great for not only shield breaking, but he does cause burn on the first hit. He also lowers his SBA -3% for each wave that passes by, which is -12% after 4 waves, up to -12%, which makes him attack pretty decently quick. I think it was like 5.4. I have A on his SBA. I think it's a 5.4. I haven't used him in a little bit, obviously. And I just think he now is overshadowed by the new exclusive unit being Rengoku. The return on his burn damage is only 30% compared to other burn units like Rengoku, who I believe is all the way up to like 75, 80%. And just outright, I don't think too much. See, this is hard because I do think Obito is also an S tier depending on what you need. I'm gonna leave him top of A. His multi-hit on the Flame Twister is better than Rengoku's single hit at the end of the day. And burn is infinitely stackable, so if you really want to run Obito, there's not much better you could go for, you know what I mean? Not everybody has Rengoku, so Obito is a very good option. I just think he fell out of S, but he's going to be an A for a good while, for sure. But I think I'm going to keep him in A. Now, next is Sun Jin Woo. S tier. I have Monarch on him. That obviously skewers my vision of him. But even in the new Igris boss event, I use Sun Jin Woo with Igris. I wasn't level 50 at the time. I use the two farm units. I use Sun Jin Woo, Igris, and I believe I use Haruka to buff them. And Sun Jin Woo not only was dealing great damage, but his ability to buff Igris, his ability to summon the shadows, and he also still has damage that holds up with the best in the game. That right there, he is meta DPS, probably the best unit you could bring. And I don't think there's a situation yet where he's not good enough. Like, I don't think they, like, the raid, he's still overpowered for it. Even though you probably want to use the new units since they get a damage increase. But his shadows come in clutch for the raid too. That summon ability is going to keep him around for a long while. Like, he will not disappear until until they really start pushing the needle. He won't disappear. He will not. Let me just make sure my stream's still going. Okay. Next is Vegeta. Now, this is the unit I was talking about that kind of replaced Naruto. Vegeta, I believe before getting buffed, he like cost 1700. His damage on placement wasn't good enough. And ultimately, he was just a worse Naruto, you know? But he is multi-hit. So he was good for draining shields and such. Well, they buffed the hell out of him. His damage on placement is much higher than I remember. His cost is only 1200, meaning you can get him out on wave 3 to deal with the raid act. And when it comes down to bosses getting behind you in infinite, him doing double the damage against one enemy, that comes in very, very often. Where it's like, you win because of that. You keep going because he's dealing so much more damage. Now, I don't have a great trade on him. So, I'm going off of what my friend has, which is Solar. And that just increases the range more so than damage in SBA. But hitting every 4 seconds and doing about, I believe his was doing like 15 to 16k. That's 30 to 32,000 on a boss, and you could place 4 of him. That's something that's too good to pass up on. So I think after all the buffs, he is now meta DPS, even though before all the buffs, he'd probably be a B tier. I still consider Naruto B tier, but he'd be like a main unit for early defense. Next is Igris. Of course, I'm doing, as you guys know, this is a stream. I'm doing this stream after they buffed Igris passive 2 and 3 back to their original form, meaning he gained 20% of the 35% damage he lost. They increased his passive 2 by they increased it back to 30% damage, 10% SBA, and they made his passive 3 damage plus 10%. I believe that means the range stays the same, but the damage got buffed again, which is phenomenal, right? And they made that buff last a little bit longer. I haven't seen the in-game look of it yet. So when they buffed it, I don't have a private server to actually check what they buffed it to. But it seems like he's back to being, the guy, right? On full upgrade, he's full AoE. Sun Jin Woo being a combo for him, meaning he gets an extra 25% from Sun Jin Woo's shadows, and that's how you unlock his passive 3. If you're using him to his fullest potential, he could carry you in infinite pretty much solo. Like, he can do it all, I would say the timing, because they did nerf Sun Jin Woo like last week. They made his Arise 135 seconds, making it pretty not ass, but it sucks for right now. uh all in all, just Igris is that guy. and Sun Jin-woo being a combo for him. They work great together. He's immune to stun as well, meaning bosses can't stun him. And he does 25% damage to bosses, which is why I said he took Chayan's place. Chayan is a crit unit, does extra crit, chance against bosses. Icarus just gets flat out more damage against bosses. Period, full stop. Meta, go grind him. If you get him, make sure you can evo him. Roll worthiness right away. I don't know. Do what you want. Like, he will carry you in all the content. This is also the unit a lot of people use for damage on their macro runs. For like Raid Act 4, Raid Act 3, this is the guy they will use because even in the raid, he was doing more damage than, or up, he was just better for the raid than the newer units. And lastly, from the release, Alucard. I don't have Alucard. I can't tell you much about him, but what I do know is he has 2 different attacks that are full AoE. During his attack, so while attacking, anybody he is attacking will take 20% more damage. He is a full multi-hit, full AoE multi-hit, and people are saying he hits like 10 to 12 times, which is phenomenal for shield breaking. He's great for bleed, meaning regeneration is just dead in the water against him. And I think in almost every situation, he's gonna carry you as well. The same way Sun Jin Woo summons shadows, he has a summon, but his summons are more like Coyote from Anime Adventures, where they go from the base or your home base, they summon from back there and then move forward all the way up to the top. Now, again, I don't have Alucard. I haven't been able to use him. I haven't seen people or ran with people who used him yet. So I don't know how, if his summon is like an ability or if it's like a continuous summon like Coyote's was. Couldn't tell you any of that. All I know is bleed does a decent amount of damage, and he allows all of your units to do 20% more damage while he's attacking. His SBA is pretty solid as well from what I've heard. I think his range is really good. His damage is said to be lacking, but he's doing bleed damage as well, so his damage isn't really lacking. You know what I'm saying? Other than that, this is all the release so far besides Takaroda and Bean and Blossom or Sakura. Now, moving on to the big three new units. You know what I'm saying? You got Tengen. I'd say he is meta DPS. He is the only mythic with full AoE. He is a multi-hit. He gives you a chance to dodge up to 60%. He lowers his SBA by 30%. And finally, on placement, he gets 10% damage in range, while also doing an extra 10% damage up to 30%, consecutively attacking the same target. This is really good for Infinite, and it's even better for raids. In the raids, Tengen's damage gets up to about, for me, 20k. I have marksman on him, so not great. But for the most part, he gets up to a very high number of damage, 20k. Adding 30% to that, you're getting an extra 6k per hit. Or not per hit, but for the full attack. That's really solid against those bosses in the raid. And even in Infinite, as they start, to crowd up in the full AoE range, he just gets better and better throughout the fight. He's good for long form content. For short term content, you probably don't really want to run him. He's pretty expensive to upgrade, and you would need to place him right away. And I just think Vegeta and Sun Jin Woo are better early placement units. Even Naruto might be a better early placement unit. But Tengen is S tier for what is the toughest content in this game right now, being Infinites. I believe Paragons are tough again, and the Raid Act 4. Next is Akaza. I think he's top of A tier. When you have him fully maxed out, you have his passive fully done, and I don't really know Akaza's passive. I'm going off what my friend used. In the raid, fully with the passive and no damage, no attacks done to him, he was doing 27k with the passive up. I think in terms of damage units, he's the most in the game. Besides, if you have Monarch on a unit or something. He probably does the most damage in the game. However, shielded enemies cook this guy because damage doesn't exist when you're hitting a shield. And if you're going against shielded enemies, Sun Jin Woo is better because of his shadows. Igris is a multi-hit. Tengen's a multi-hit. Vegeta's a multi-hit. Alucard's a multi-hit. Obito's a multi-hit. Naruto on placement is a multi-hit. So him being maxed, like, when maxed out, Obito's multi-hit, 2-hit, multi-hit, 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 multi-hit. So when you're only doing a single hit, it's really gonna draw you back a little bit from being a meta DPS character. But I would say he is a boss killer. He is going to kill everything in his path if he's fully maxed out. Because those extra 11%, 11%, 11%, 33% when he uses his ability, all that extra damage, he's probably one of the strongest units in the game. And he's a 4 placement. It's just the fact that he's a 1-hit that I'm putting him in A tier. But if you're going to go for infinite or anything like that, he probably will carry the hell out of you. Not gonna lie. He probably will take you pretty far. I mean, there's not much else to really say about him. I personally don't have him evo'd yet. I'm just going off what my friend thinks as well. And he said Akaza is pretty strong, just that single hit really is a detriment. Because dealing with shielded enemies, man, you want to upgrade those that can deal with the shielded enemies. I'm also throwing Rengoku at the top of it. I think his damage is just slightly too low to put him in S tier as a DPS character. Now, his burn damage is crazy. But again, he is a single hit when he is fully maxed out. This means when you're doing, when we get into later content in the game where shielded becomes common, or I don't even know what else could really hinder these two, right? There's not a lot. But when shielded does become more common, you're not going to want to upgrade these guys. However, his burn is great utility. And when you're running other units to deal with that shield, these two can be S tier. But when you're just using the unit alone, they will slip by. Those shielded enemies will slip by. It's the same problem I have with Tengen on placement, but he instantly, after 2 upgrades, becomes a multi-hit. You know what I'm saying? Akaza on placement is multi-hit, but then you don't want to max him out, meaning are you going to deal enough damage to bosses at that point, right? It's a very hard thing to judge on him. But if we are saying like just pure DPS, no shielded involved, Rengoku would probably go above Igris because he doubles his damage with his burn. I think it's 75% or 80% extra damage of burn, and it's Purgatory Flames, meaning I believe it's a double proc. It's 2 different burn damages. So that's pretty damn strong. And burn is now infinitely stackable. So you run him with Obito, you're going to cook, right? I think I might have to do it like this, though. I'm going to move Rengoku up here. Because I do think, in terms of his burn damage, you will find him to be much more reliable than Obito. They didn't upgrade his AoE circle at the end too. I don't know, man. Obito is like in A plus unit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think I like this list though. I think I like this list. Because I do think Vegeta. They made Vegeta too good. On placement, boss killer, good multi hit. Pretty much multi hit all the way through until Big Bang attack, but that's not what you're using him for. Yeah, I think I like this list right here.